that touch and go kind of situation, or you really need to take the bench through a very comprehensive exercise of the law, the facts, etc. I don't think this virtual court system is going to be very effective in that. As I said, one, that you need that connect, you need that intimacy, that real experience of the courtroom to be able to make eye contact with the judge. In fact, what we find is some of the time, because the judges, of course, they are forced to sit in the same in the same room, even now with the virtual courts, but they have to maintain that distance. So they are wearing masks. And I found it very difficult because you can't see the expression of the judge. You don't know what he's thinking. You don't know whether he's on your page on a particular point and whether you should be moving on to another point. So because that, that there's something missing in that process. And therefore, I do not think that it's a good substitute when you need to pursue, a matter requires an argument. The second thing I would say is, I think, this virtual court, it also dilutes a certain sanctity, what, some would call it a tacky expression, but the quote unquote, the majesty of the court. I think there is a reason and there's a rationale behind a court being arranged in a particular way. The bar on one side, the bench on the other side, the emblem, the chairs raised, the judges sitting on an elevation. It's not meant to make them more comfortable as much as it is to really convey that this is, this represents the rule of law. And the public has a great deal of confidence in that system. So if we are really to keep that going, I think, reducing the court to, for example, sometimes when they're not sitting in court, it could be like an arbitration conference, or it could be like any other meeting, and it doesn't convey that, there is a sense of awe, that aura which a court is meant to have, and I think that is missing, and that will have an impact on how seriously you take the law, how seriously you take the court process. And why just litigants? It's even lawyers. You saw in the early days, I remember reading an order, I think that was from the Rajasthan High Court, where a lawyer appeared in very inappropriate attire. So that caused a lot of titters and amusement. But I think the point that one should make here is that it conveys that even lawyers don't take the system seriously enough in a virtual court system. So I feel that in the long term, this is not a sustainable thing. I mean, of course, we have no choice at the moment, and this is perhaps going to carry on for a few months. But I think ideally, what we do want, of course, we want lessons to be learned from this experience. We want to make it an opportunity for reform. So what you probably should have, ideally speaking, is a hybrid system where you can, depending on the kind of matter, the kind of application, you can divert a certain, types of applications which are routine in nature, which are, some of them may be just sort of housekeeping exercises, that can be relegated to the virtual court system. And the rest of it is to be dealt with by the real courts. So I think that can be done quite efficiently, and that, of course, we have to go, court by court and see, because we have a complex hierarchy of courts in India, depending on the kind of cases that come there, the kind of, sometimes the profile of the litigants also has a role to play in how much technology they can handle, how much they can't, etc. So this is an exercise which needs to be done, and it needs a great deal of collaboration between the bench and the bar at every level in the country. So that's one. I mean, I would say, things like, for example, your traffic offenses or, consumer complaints. I think that they can be dealt with very effectively through a virtual court system. And I think the important thing is we must give the litigant that choice. because oftentimes in consumer complaints we find that the value of the claim is far exceeded by the cost of traveling, say, to Delhi to the National Commission, etc. So I think those kind of things can be dealt with very efficiently through the virtual court system. And I would say at the least we must give the litigant a choice. For example, even in the Supreme Court, I would say that, look, if a local advocate has dealt with the matter right from the start, and he happens to be in Kerala, and we don't know how many times the matter will get adjourned, etc., and therefore it's very expensive for the lawyer to be flown down each time. I think it's a very good idea to give the litigant a choice. You want to fly your advocate in, that's fine. You want to engage someone in the Supreme Court, that's fine. And you want your local lawyer who's very conversant with the matter to argue it, well, give him that choice too. So I think that gives the litigant, who in a sense is the real beneficiary of the justice system, a choice in the matter. And I would say that that apart, there are many changes that this experience can, catalyze. For example, in the Supreme Court, I would say we use far too much paper. And it's not just cumbersome, but you'll find that you need bags and bags. Every senior advocate will have bags and bags of papers to be carried to court. Those bags will choke up the corridors of the court. You'll find people tripping over those bags, and they've actually graduated to a status symbol. How many bags you have, and they're placed in strategic places in the corridors of the Supreme Court. And then it perpetuates a kind of feudalism, because you're going to have support staff ferrying those bags around. So I think things like this can certainly be cleaned up through by just using we can dispense with a lot of paper through these e-filings, etc. So those are things that certainly, but I think that in the long term we would need a more hybrid process, and we cannot completely dispense with the real hearing. I think that is important. I think in your mail to me, you had also made a mention of how are young lawyers to just fresh graduates, what are they to do in this kind of situation, and this must be very, very worrying and exasperating for them, because they can't immediately step into the courts. Well, I would say this, that the litigation in particular is something for the long haul. There's no magic that's going to happen in the first few months, or I mean, I can assure you that no magic happened to me for years. So I don't think that there's a problem there. It's okay. If you can't step immediately into the courts, and you can't, well, I think, yes, not being able to earn can be a problem for many people. But I think in litigation, if you want to be in litigation, you've got to tell yourself that, look, for the first few years, I mean, that was what I was advised, and that's what I advise anyone who wishes to take my advice, that look, for the first few years, you've got to find other means of supporting yourself through family, because this is, if you're really looking for the long term, this is not going to sustain you very easily for the first 2 years from your own practice. So that's something you've got to be mentally prepared for in any case. But I think that this time can be used very well to just read up. There's just so much out there. I think the great thing is that there's just so much material so easily accessible to you. You don't have to have a great library anymore to be able to read. There are great podcasts. And there's so much new, there are young lawyers writing for a change. I think that's very heartening. And I'm sure they're writing in your idiom. So, you'll find that interesting, and this is a good time to read up. And there are great podcasts to listen to as well. I saw a great film last year, and I really enjoyed it, and I'm sure at least the women in the room would enjoy it. And it was on the ground of sex. I think that's what it was called, on the basis of sex. I'm sorry, it was on the life of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and I thought that was a really powerful film. There's a lot more you can read up, and I think that particularly for those of you who want to be litigation lawyers, we end up being generalists, particularly say in the Supreme Court or the High Courts. We have to be ready to argue any kind of matter. And there, I think it's really important that you have a breadth of understanding of areas which may not be pure law. I think it can be very limiting to just be a lawyer and not have a sense of the outside world. So whether you want to be a lawyer, whether eventually you want to be a judge, I think it's very important to have a sort of a social sensitivity and generally knowledge of things that are going on around you. That's important. So I think this is a great time to read. And I'll just give you a small example of my own experience. Of course, we've never experienced anything like this before, but I know that years and years ago, when I had a kind of hiatus in my career, initially it was because I took about 3 months off when my first child was born, but I thought that was reasonably decent turnaround time. But when I came back, I found, because it wasn't a job, I was in counsel practice, and my briefs had been kind of redistributed among other lawyers, and I had to wait a really long time. And just, I guess, the fact that, maybe 20 or 22 years ago, it didn't inspire confidence. If a woman comes back after she's had a young child, psychologically, solicitors don't have that kind of confidence in you, at least to start with. They don't think you're going to last out. So I had many months to kill before I landed a new brief. And that's when I decided to start writing. And it did occur to me that maybe, I'm much too inexperienced to be writing. And it's a bit audacious to be writing as a very young lawyer. But I decided to give it a shot, because, when people are older and they're busier and they're far more successful, you don't find that kind of time to write. And I can tell you that I was much more meticulous back then with my writing than I can boast of today. So I think that adversity, if I may call it that, or that setback, was in some ways a blessing in disguise, because it yielded a book. And although that took much longer, but it yielded a book. So I think out of any situation where you find yourself, that's not the only way of doing it. There are many other ways of finding something useful and productive and constructive to do with your time. But this is just an example that I thought that I would share with you. I never imagined back then that it would yield a book. But, it gives me a lot of satisfaction even today that it has perhaps been of some use to students. So, that's just an example from my own experience. So I think I have said more or less enough. Maybe I have exceeded my time. I'm sorry if I've eaten into anyone else's time, but if there are any questions or whatever, I'm happy to answer them. Or would you like to move on with the next speaker?
I think there is one question for you, and since you're going to leave for lunch, so I'll just take this one question, and then we'll, talk with we'll have listen to the other two panelists, and then we'll take other questions. So ma'am, there's this one question that what, according to you, a law student or a law fresher entering the field focus more on to stand out, especially given the post-COVID scenario?
Well, I don't think that this is you're going to probably get much fewer opportunities right now. I mean, that's true of seniors as well. So I would say that just any brief comes your way, just do your very best that you can, because you're not in a hurry, in the sense that, you're not inundated with just too many briefs, more than you can handle. And so deliver on quality, get your quality noticed, is what I would say at a time like this.
Okay, thank you, Madhavi. For students, I think one thing, because I have a lot of students whom I interact with, for the subjects, for everything, they keep on asking me, what about our future? So I think something that we can really take back from Madhaviji's discussion is that we should use this time for reading up. And that is a very, very good insight that Madhaviji has shared with us. For all my students, I understand all of you are extremely worried about your future, but I think this is back that we should take. And I keep saying always in the class as well that law is a social science. So as Madhaviji very rightly pointed out, we not only need to know about the law, but also other facets of the society. And this is the time which can be utilized by the students, to just build a backup and understand a greater knowledge base. So thank you so much, Madhaviji, for this. Students, so we go.
Thank you, Ms. Divan.
Madhaviji, thank you so much. And Abhijeet, I'll invite Abhijeet now to as our next speaker. So I'm again muting my microphone. So Abhijeet, please continue. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks so much. Indeed a pleasure to come here and discuss a little bit more or discuss about what we think about how things are going. Let me, the topic is how to prepare yourself for a post-COVID legal world. And preparation in my mind, or at least the way I think, is a lot to do with how we think. It's all a lot about the mental side to it. I like the approach that Ms. Divan had, when she talked about the comparison to the 1918 Spanish flu. I think it's important to put things in perspective. I mean, it's one thing today when we are hearing so many bad things happening in India and the rest of the world, it's easy to get affected by it in a big way, think that, this is the end of the world, nothing will come out of it. But let's do some comparison. If we go back in 1918, I think more than 1 million people lost their lives. And we do not know the exact number because it's very difficult to calculate the number of people who died. If you put that number in comparison to the population of the world that time, and if you put the number of people who have lost lives today during this COVID period, to the population of the world, which stands in excess of 6 billion. So you already see that there is huge progress, both in terms of information flow, both in terms of our ability to counter something. I'm not trying to imply that we have a solution for COVID, but what I'm trying to stress upon is that we are definitely better off in terms of the situation that we were then. And again, going back to Ms. Divan's point about the age of technology. Of course, we have the age of technology. And as we speak, I have on another system, a conference going on because work has not stopped for us, even in Europe. So what I'm trying to say is that the age of technology provides a huge advantage for everyone. And when we say that preparing yourself for this post-COVID legal period, one is to read. I mean, there's no doubt you have to read a lot, and you have to read not only at the start of the career, but during the career and extensively. And depends entirely in terms of the area that you want to specialize. That's read. Research, I think reading is fine. I mean, you can pick what you want to read, but equally important is to pick important topic that you want to research on. And related to that, and again, going back to Ms. Divan's point, which I thought was very nice, about the time that, during her gap, she was writing a book. And since we are here talking about the audience is mostly the students, I think it's important to read, it's important to do research, and it's also important to write. While, I mean, it's possible that, when what you write today, you're not very confident and you think that it might not be accepted in the best publication possible. I don't think that is the most important thing. It's about the perspective, it's about how are we going in the right direction. And if we are, then I think one should be happy with that. By that, what I'm trying to imply is that if you're writing something, start with the easiest thing. And today, again, we're living in the age of technology. The world is full of important and good legal blogs. Start writing articles for those blogs. Then you come, the number of online magazines, submit articles for that. Then you have, of course, the All India Reporter, you have the SEC, etc. I mean, keep improving the quality. So read, write, and research. I think this is something very important in this time. Then I think, when I was going through the emails exchange with the placement association, and I think they're doing a really good job. And I say that because I've been there in that situation not long back. When, you pass out, you don't have a job, and you think how to tackle it. I think it's important that one of the questions that I noticed was about whether virtual internship will help. I would like to rephrase this question. The question is not whether it is internship or virtual internship. I think the bigger focus should be, what do you do in that internship? It's not that, and I'm not saying with any specific reference to a certain law firm. And Radhika will, of course, talk about Khaitan and its excellent firm. But the important thing is not internship or virtual internship. It's about what you do in that internship. So if you're today doing a virtual internship, and in that virtual internship, you have been assigned to seniors who give you a lot of work, writing, reading, researching again, then I think you're fine. There's no issue per se. So you have the ease to connect. You have the ease to do internship even at a time when, it's not the ideal way. And, we are in June and July when you have most of the internships. So that is something that people should focus on. 2020 is a crisis period. And, I finished my LLM in 2008. And that was also a crisis period. 2008 was a crisis period because that was the beginning of the global economic recession. I had planned my career in a certain way. My idea was that I'd finish my law from Delhi University, finished that in 2007, go to the US in 2007, immediately after completing my course, and end up working on the Wall Street. It did not really happen because in 2008, when I finished my program, the world economy crashed big time, beginning with the Lehman Brothers filing for insolvency. So, it didn't, the way I had planned my life, it didn't happen. But that doesn't mean that, if you have to reanalyze, revisit your plan, it's the end of the world. It is not. Maybe it just forces you to look for different ways. So what I did, and I would like to share my experience, I did the practical thing. Not only there were no jobs in the US in 2008, law firms with extremely high reputation, they were collapsing, they were filing for bankruptcy. So I came back to India, took a few months to find even a job in India. And I thought that an LLM from a good law school in the US would be a perfect guarantee to get into a law firm, but things were different. So it took me many months of applying again and again, that I got a job with a good law firm. And again, going back to my perspective, I was always very keen to work abroad, and it had to do with my plans in my life. That was to go abroad, have a different experience, work with different law firms, have a different exposure. So after working at a good law firm in India for a few years, which is J. Sagar Associates, I again started looking at opportunities outside. And all this I'm saying that, it's how we have to think right now. When we say that how do we prepare ourselves for a post-COVID legal period, it's about where we stand and what is it important for us to get to where we want to be. If you're talking about somebody who's still in the second year, well, focus a lot on the internships. Focus on a lot of publications, do paper presentation. I did quite a few. And I think it's so important to improve your oral skills, your writing skills, your speaking skills. I'm told that a lot of moot court competitions are being done in a virtual world. So it's not that mooting has completely stopped. And anybody who is serious, especially to have a career in litigation, I think mooting is a very good practice of how real litigation world is. So that's something that can also be done. I can go on, but I think I would prefer to listen to what Radhika has to say, and then maybe a more interactive session with the students would be probably a better idea than to have a monologue. Thank you.
Thanks, Abhijeet. I'm just going to quickly request the host to enable my screen share, please. I'm an MBA student, so PowerPoint presentations are my absolute favorite. So please bear with me while I quickly put up slides. Hi, Ruchita, I'm waiting for you to enable.
No, I think there is the student will do it. They're more tech savvy than I am. So,
sure.
You
That's
yes,
fine.
ma'am, we're on it. Just a second.
Yeah. Okay.
And I'm seeing a lot of questions popping up in the chat box.
Yes, there are.
It's a sign that people are also paying attention.
True. Very true.
Saturday afternoon.
But I think one thing I would like to add here, to what Abhijeet said, that, while you write, whether you go for a publication in a good, in a good publication house or not, whatever, or maybe you are not even accepted for your publication. One thing to the students I want to add, and this is from, of course, an academic point of view, when you write something, you have a lot of things to research, and that research helps you a lot. Even if there is no publication as such, that research is definitely going to help you. And I think that should be the motivation, that you learn, you get to know a lot of things while you are writing about something or reading about something. So you shouldn't get disheartened at the first place, because, you know, as the academic world goes, a lot of articles from students. I have a lot of interaction with students where students say that where to send the articles, they do not accept, we keep on writing. So these problems are there, and probably in the upcoming time, we will be able to deal with that. Of course, we have a lot of online platforms now for publications, but this is one thing that I would like to say, that research definitely helps in at least building your knowledge, and that is something that you take a long way forward. You know, it's not just for the time period.
Ruchita, a quick comment on that. I think research is also something that, or you learn a lot when you're also researching for the moot court competition. So
True.
if the
Very true.
acquire knowledge, I think even mooting will help in a long way.
Definitely. And I think CLC does a good job in mooting. So I hope we can take Abhijeet's opinion, and more students get into the mooting thing.
I was a big time mooter during my law student days. And
okay.
With some caution, I would say that I was addicted to mooting. And
no, it's very good. Yes.
It was a terrific experience.
Definitely. Definitely, yes.
Yeah.
So I think we're ready with Radhika's presentation. So I'll again put my mic on mute and let us hear from Radhika. Radhika, here you go.
Thank you, Ruchita. Thank you, Abhijeet. So a very good afternoon to my fellow panelists. Of course, Ms. Divan has left, but Abhijeet, thank you so much for being with us, of course. The faculty and the student body who is, witnessing this webinar. At the outset, I would like to thank you for inviting me to be a part of this webinar, which seeks to address a very eminent and pertinent issue of the impact of COVID-19 outbreak, particularly in the legal world. Funnily, a friend and I were just sitting on a park bench after a workout, and I promised we were 6 feet apart. So I said, do you think we'll notice? So she said, what are we going to notice? She said, so I retorted saying, notice when things are going to return to normal. So she claimed, how do you know it's going to become normal? I thought about this and I, paused and said, perhaps, when the guy selling Golgappas stops sanitizing his hands between customers. She obviously shrugged. No one in this, no one really says it out loud, but everybody assumes that one day, not far away, things will go back to what they used to be. I found this image, which is on your slide, particularly befitting. Life isn't normal for anyone during this pandemic, and slowly, with the new everyday reality, right? As for me, at home and at work, given the rapid pace at which things are changing, my new normal is continually to get accustomed to new normals. And I think all of us will agree that this is the phase everywhere. Just to give you a sense on about my talking points today, I would like to broadly cover a couple of these new normals that we've been talking about, which have been talked about by Mrs. Divan and by Abhijeet on the new normals of the post-COVID new legal world. Perhaps a sneak peek into changes in the hiring process in the post-COVID era, the short and medium-term impact on the graduating batch of 2020, and lastly, how can you as students, keep your head above the water and tide over to the post-COVID market? In short, how do you stay relevant, right? Just to give you an understanding, COVID has obviously already impacted the global economy adversely. But the question that, a lot of colleagues and I discuss over our virtual chai breaks is, is it likely to throw our legal profession into unmanageable and unprecedented challenges? Yes and no. Both Abhijeet and Mrs. Divan have sort of touched upon these points. will we somehow fast forward to a brave new world, AKA this new normal that, radically all of us are talking about? Will we sort of go back to our good old days of, February 2020, or somehow we'll get past this and go back to business as usual, although with, of course, certain enhanced or improved ways of working from home, technology, and so on and so forth? Or will it somewhere be in between? No matter what challenges and changes there are, when I think about the legal industry, I can envision it to adapt itself to incorporate and account for those changes. It always has. I've been with Khaitan for almost about 5 years now, and I've, of course, haven't seen the tides that, perhaps Mrs. Divan or Abhijeet have seen, through their careers. But my belief is that the legal sector always continues to forge ahead. And to give you an instance, and tying back into what Mrs. Divan was saying, the general impression, has always been, that the practice of law has been slow to embrace technology. Earlier, the extent to which the technology was integrated into the practice was limited to accessing online databases, which was merely a substitute for libraries, and the word processing softwares replacing typewriters. However, in these exigent times, there has been a visible evolution, as it is evident from how the judiciary and the legal practitioners, across the world, have swiftly adapted to the new normal, specifically to India, have adapted to the new normal way.
I think there is some problem with Radhika's audio. Could you please check, Himanshu?
Ma'am, I think there's some problem with her internet connection. I think there's a problem with the internet.
Okay, so let's wait.
Her screen has frozen.
Yes, her screen has frozen.
One of the challenges that we're facing in a technology.
Yes, that Madhavi was talking about, that suddenly off. Yes. I guess we can wait. This is a new thing that every day we have a new thing. And
I had my first Zoom call only 3 weeks back when all this happened. I mean, I have not used Zoom.
Okay.
It's normally
same with me as well.
Exactly. So
same with me as well. It was just in the month of March onwards that I started taking online classes through Zoom, and then I realized, okay, even that is possible. So initially it was very difficult because I'm accustomed in a class, a lot of students, and
live interaction.
Exactly. And then over Zoom, I can't see anybody. And I don't know. I just don't know, because, for a teacher, it's very important to have this eye contact and body language of students.
And I think Radhika is back online.
But although I cannot see her, but yes, her screen is being shared.
Yeah. So I have some optimism that she'll come back.
Am I audible now? I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened.
It's perfectly fine, Radhika.
I think this is technology.
Exactly, just what you were talking about some time back.
My bad. So I was just reiterating the point of how it appears, and encouragingly so, that while this pandemic is generating real breakpoints and inflection points, in some areas, it's also serving as a potent accelerant of several underlying trends that we've been percolating over time. Given this, new and potentially permanent trends, the current and future generations of law students who are anyway more adept and comfortable with technology, just like we just noticed now, should try and develop and hone their skills in areas of preparation of case briefs and transaction bibles in soft copy. We look at bookmarking and indexing, of course, just to name a few. Just to give you a sense of what's going to happen in the recruitment landscape going forward, I'm sure most of you will agree that we're experiencing a radical lifestyle change that the coronavirus has brought upon us. It is also getting us thinking about, what the world is going to look like when this crisis ends. Right now, we are in a bear market, right? And the near future isn't looking too optimistic for some of our businesses who are possibly going to see any growth for some time to come. Due to these changes in social behavior patterns and the need to adhere to social distancing, at least I see a lot of change in the future in the interaction intensive processes. And when I say that, I'm specifically referring to some of our HR processes where the Yeah, I was talking to the students and my co-panelists about, remote recruiting or virtual recruiting that's going to become the norm. The engagement platforms that we're going to use is, of course, email, which continues, social media, other communication platforms, which will, become the need of the hour to stay connected, which anyway it has. Building an employer brand digitally, we're going to continue and proactively highlight culture, leadership speak on employer differentiation. At the pre-interview or the screening stage, there's going to be rigorous use of digital tests to screen. I think one takeaway for most students here will be preparing themselves for psychometric assessments, critical reasoning tests, which anyway globally that's being used, for as a pre-screening process. In terms of an interview process, we're going to move away from the in-person meetings to a completely video conferencing platform to stay connected and, of course, take these interviews. Virtual career fairs, events, more personalized career paths, greater insights into candidate experiences are quickly becoming the new normal for the post-COVID era, as I see it, and closing the gaps between legacy talent management, new virtual, remote recruiting, and AI-based talent management platforms are something that's putting candidate potential and experience at the center of the architecture of recruitment. Just to give you a sense of, what's going to happen in the recruitment process space. I'm sure most of the graduating batch of 2020 would agree with this, cartoon that's being displayed. This is not exactly how they saw 2020 pan out, but I am going to present some grim facts and figures, but I promise to show you some light at the end of the tunnel. While our GDP forecasts for financial year 21 look dire, Standard & Poor projects a 5% contraction in the 2021 space, versus a 1.8% growth forecast made in April. Standard & Poor also said, mentioned that it is expected to pick up at a rate of 8.5%, in the following fiscal. With this kind of an economic slowdown, which is, obviously a significant number in the financial year 21, the job prospects will commensurately be bleak for the graduating batch. Obviously the unemployment rate is high, the urban unemployment rate is high, and so on and so forth. The hiring sentiment in the country is to witness an adverse impact with, interviews, with a short-term impact of about 60 to 65% of the interviews getting delayed. I see, I see that there is light at the end of the tunnel, because I see that there is a silver lining, right? The sector of law weathers downturns better than the overall economy. As you see in these three images, we had sunny days of being out and about. We had and continue to have virtual days. And then we have evolved our old ways with social distancing. Having said that, there will be a wide spectrum of demand responses across legal sectors and practice areas. Several practice areas in law sector may see an uptake in demand. I think this answers one of the questions that one of the students had just on question saying, what else can they do apart from litigation? they can look at, getting themselves abreast of what's happening in other commercial fields of law, namely, employment and labor, insolvency and bankruptcy, technology and data privacy, dispute resolution, to name a few. So I think it's time to act very decisively, very intelligently to survive in this kind of a market and follow where the work goes. This may also mean that you need to relocate to a different market, or look at an alternate practice area which may have perhaps not been your primary area of interest. To reiterate, and I always say this to anybody who comes and talks to me about the legal sector, it is absolutely my belief that we will always continue to forge ahead. Moving on, while times are tough, it is extremely important that we keep our heads above the water, given that potentially more and more of the lawyers' work would be conducted online. It would be very helpful if you students could enroll in legal writing courses. And I can't emphasize this enough, considering both my panelists have spoken along these lines, very vehemently. So to enroll in these online legal writing courses, look at soft skill or etiquette training programs, because this is what the new normal is going to look like. You're going to be having to draft emails, you're going to conduct online meetings. So ensure that you use this time to even enroll yourself into multiple courses that are offered by multiple, online, educational platforms. There's Coursera, there's EDX, there's Udemy, there's Indian Academy of Management and Law. So multiple, educational platforms offer a host of courses. And again, to reiterate, or I cannot emphasize enough, that law is a vast subject, and through research papers you can go and pick up any subject or topic from this ocean and explore it in depth. And as Ruchita rightly pointed out, writing a research paper not only guarantees your knowledge on the subject, but also teaches you how to form structured arguments around that specific area of law. You learn the art of writing. A plethora of online journals devote themselves completely to the work of law students. So you can explore that option as well. I think Mrs. Divan also pointed out reading books and listening to podcasts. I would add documentaries, which are also a great way of absorbing information. You could pick up books such as Legal Eagles, which is on the top stories of the top 7 lawyers in India. Look at books which were along the lines of the 10 judgments that change India, which was written by Mrs. Zia Modi. While it is for us to get completely lost in the world of Netflix, there are documentaries such as the famous the O.J. Simpson trial, where you can obviously learn a thing or two. A host of interesting webinars such as these, and there are multiple others which are free on various topical issues that are being conducted. So please don't forget to sign up for them. They will come handy, you don't know when. So those are things that you could perhaps look at. I think in the end, I would also say that given the changes this pandemic is bringing across the different hiring strategies, across the different law firms, preparing for digital assessments or critical reasoning tests, which is a common aptitude test globally, that may come up during a job application, maybe a good investment of your time. So while I say that this is time for uncertainty, I think it's also a time for opportunity. I would sincerely urge you to utilize this time to upskill, contribute to society, and most importantly, learn about yourself and the world around you. Also remember, work is not everything. Rekindle the things that excited you while you had the time to keep a hobby. I don't see them as TV points, but as a part of the journey to become a well-rounded person. I always use the phrase for myself, you know nothing, Jon Snow. Well, know a little more when you have the time. Thank you. Happy to take questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Radhika. I think some of the things that you have pointed out, I think all the 3 of the panelists are almost on the same line regarding this. But yes,
it's a good thing, right, Ruchita? Makes things easier for
definitely.
you.
Yes, undoubtedly. But yeah, one thing from Radhika, specifically for my students, I would like to say is, in the legal profession, we are always about drafting and legal writing, which has always been the top priority. But along with that, because now times are definitely changing, and students also need to work apart from legal drafting are soft skills. Obviously, for a lawyer, speaking is very important. So you should definitely know public speaking skills. So that's one. So online courses that Radhika was referring definitely would be helpful. And another thing which I do find in a lot of my students is also that the skill to write properly, to write in a critical way, or to write, because it's a very different thing. It's not only knowing English that makes you a good, email writer, or, whatever you want to communicate to the other person. So that way, soft skill in terms of your writing skill is also important. And thank you very much, Radhika, for bringing this point up. It's usually the management students, because I'm an MBA myself. So in management, we get to write so much of soft skill, over the 2 years of management courses. We only give PowerPoint presentations and all. But yes, for the legal profession as well, I think this is one thing we need to really keep up with. I think we can take questions now.
Sure.
So since no one has mentioned any specific panelists, so I'll just take the questions, and any one of you who is okay with answering could go ahead, or even both of you could add. So 1 minute. So I think Himanshu's question specifically goes to where, will we see the courts go virtual? I think Madhavi ji has already spoken on this, so I'm not taking this. Next is from Shaurya Gupta. What can a fresher in the field of litigation do other than practice in order to sustain himself? I think this also we have spoken, if anybody wants to comment anything briefly, but I think we have already covered this. So I'll go to the next question. How do you predict the legal landscape shaping in the coming years, especially in the corporate law firms? Okay, I think Radhika and Abhijeet both can comment on this. Apart from the basic internships and general knowledge of syllabus, what can an average law student do to stand apart? Any innovative ways that you see developing?
Radhika, do you want to go first?
I'm sorry, I didn't get the question. Could you please repeat that for me?
Innovative ways that, an average law student can go about, apart from the, corporate law syllabus and others, because a lot of our students want to go into the corporate world. So anything else that you think that law students should look into?
I think beyond what has already been discussed on, the different things that they can do to keep themselves abreast, as corporate lawyers, from what the different reports that I've read from BCG, McKinsey, and so on and so forth, they're all saying transactions or transactional work may per se, may see a little bit of a slowdown. But as Khaitan, we are looking at training our transactional lawyers to even look at restructuring matters. So it won't hurt to look at a dual specialization for people. At least keep yourself abreast of what's happening in the different aspects of law, which are very close to your, area of, primary interest. So I think my response would be, I think educate yourself more. And as and when you start writing more on different aspects, you will automatically educate yourself.
Very true.
Definitely. Just would like to just add to what Radhika said, and completely agreed with her. And since we're talking about how law students, and before I answer that question, have a problem per se to categorize anyone as an average law student. I don't know what that means. I think law students are all brilliant people working hard.
It's being humble. I think it's being humble. That's what.
Humility is a good virtue.
Yes.
I think, and I speak with some experience being myself an ex-CLC student or alumnus of CLC. You have to take this LLB course as a professional course. I mean, both you and Radhika have done MBA, and the way you approach MBA is very different. I saw that at CLC, and I hope it has changed now, since it's been many years since I graduated. You have to take the course very professionally, and that basically means doing everything from moving to internships to paper presentation to getting good grades. In terms of how you focus or reskill yourself today, as I think Radhika mentioned, if you want to specialize in corporate, well, even at our global law firm, Orrick, we are seeing a lot of restructuring and insolvency related cases. In fact, right now on a parallel call, there is an insolvency related matter happening, discussion. So if you are if you want to specialize in corporate law, take not only courses on corporate law, but related topics, insolvency, restructuring. That will be interesting. One. Second, if you think that in your law school that is not possible, well, the possibility of learning is not limited to the law school. You can always take a course, provided by, say, for instance, Indian Law Institute, and focus on that. And sometimes people ask a question, how much value it will have on a CV or not. I mean, it's difficult to answer. It depends who is looking at CV and with what mindset. But it definitely helps to improve your skills. If nothing else, you learn something more. And if today somebody is graduating or tomorrow somebody is graduating, you say that not only I understand corporate, but since there are some changes happening, the world economy or Indian economy is not doing well, we are seeing a lot of restructuring work happening. So I think it's important to also gain some skills or some elementary knowledge about fields like restructuring.
Thank you so much, Abhijeet. Both of you, thank you very much for your answers. The next question, I think, is for Abhijeet only, that how do you think that law students can make a career in foreign law firms?
I think there has to be a lot of planning for that. And the planning must start at the earliest possible. And it's never too early to plan. I mean, you can start planning right from the first year of your LLB. Because this question is from a CLC student, I can tell you that it's a tough task. I wouldn't say it's impossible because I'm not the only person from CLC who has gone abroad and is now working abroad. But the number of people coming from CLC abroad is very few. So I think in terms of planning, you have to do what Radhika has said and I have said in terms of having an all-round approach and not just emphasizing or just focusing on getting good grades. Good grades are important. Good grades are important because that is one of the key parameters for getting selected to do an LLM. It's very rare that somebody who has not done LLM will have a chance to get a job abroad. Overall, I mean, if you look at the number of people going abroad for LLM, that is only increasing. So develop yourself holistically, do everything possible. B, when it comes to doing LLM, please, I cannot emphasize it enough, that only choose the top law school abroad. And by that, I mean a very few, and that's my personal view. I say that because, if there are thousands of people with LLM degrees and Indian qualification, and if I'm for a law firm, I think I'll be very selective. I'll probably go to just Oxford and Cambridge and NYU and Yale, Harvard and Stanford. Why would I go, keep going down at the other law schools? And I have no disrespect for the other law school. Each law school is good, but I'm just saying what probably works in my experience. So that's something there. In my case, I finished my LLB in 2007. I immediately went for LLM. That doesn't mean that, that is the only way to do it. Maybe because of the crisis that we're in right now, and it will take some time, and nobody knows how long because it's too difficult to estimate with any certainty. Maybe it will take 1 year, maybe it will take 2 years or 3 years. So if somebody is planning to pursue LLM this year and it is possible to defer that admission, then I think it's probably a sensible thing to do. Because the job market will not transform itself. And I'm saying job market abroad because that's the idea. If you're spending in dollars and pounds, you would like to work and earn in those currency and not in Indian currency, then I think it makes sense to defer it because in 1 or 2 years, things will start to get better. Again, I think it depends a lot on your risk appetite. If your parents are supporting you and you think it's a chance that you want to take, by all means.
Thank you, Abhijeet. The next question is about the government and the infrastructure. Now, personally, I don't know whether we'll be in a position to answer this or not. And regarding online
resources, we can all guess, hope, and pray.
Yes, true. And regarding this access to software, I think Manupatra DU does have access for students. So you must go to the library and Manupatra is available. Apart from Manupatra, I know for sure that the CLC library does have other, well, if not all resources, which I completely agree to, but I think we have Jester and Heen Online we are trying to get. I'm not sure whether we've got it yet or not. But I don't know whether this panel is the right platform to answer this question, but I'm sure we are doing our
quick comment on that. And again,
yes.
just of what has been my experience as a law student, we also had the same issue. Probably at that time, again, we did not have so many access to so many softwares and legal database. One thing that we did, we formed a group of students and who were active in writing for different journals or mooting, and we pooled our resources. And instead of relying, you see, it's very easy to put the blame on the institution, say that doesn't work, this doesn't work. It's very easy. Or I'm a first generation lawyer. Again, I think one of the questions that was in the email, it's okay. I mean, you're a first generation lawyer, figure a way out. You cannot change it. You cannot force your parents to go to pursue law now. So it doesn't help. So pool your resources, I mean, maybe there will be a group of motivated, every batch has a group of highly motivated students. Sure. Resources. I mean, I don't think this getting an access to Manupatra or any of these online resources will be very, very expensive. Consider it as an investment, and it will be worth it.
True. No, and another thing is, when I passed out my LLB, because I'm from a very small town, so my university, which is again a state university, not even a big name like CLC-DU, so we did moot, and we did not have Manupatra at that point of time, and no online resources, whatever. We just had Google, no smartphones as well. Yeah, so we did rely on books, and we did moot. So
exactly, you rely on the books.
Let's not complain. Yeah, let's not complain about that. And there
not
are
complain, but figure a way out, not just complain.
True, and exactly, and we do have a lot of online resources available in the open Google platform as well. So we can get a lot from there too. So, we should keep our minds open. That's something. And the attitude should be positive. I think that's the most important thing here. Okay, the next question, any specific resources you would recommend for the online pre-screening tests? I think this is for Radhika specifically. So any thing that you would like to recommend?
So there is a Watson-Glaser test, which is globally used, across the different law firms internationally. And perhaps iterations of that may be used in India across at least the tier 1 law firms. If not now, maybe another year or another couple of years. And I'm sure Abhijeet can add to the different psychometric tests or assessments that are being used in Germany at this point in time. But this one's the most common one used in UK as well as the US. There are multiple platforms where you can just type Watson-Glaser and they'll give you sample questions. A critical reasoning test doesn't have to be specifically an iteration of the Watson-Glaser, but you could look at critical reasoning tests online, which will give you case studies and how do you analyze a case study and how do you present an argument and so on and so forth. And of course, something specific, just Google it and you'll definitely find it. But things along, reasoning tests.
Radhika, I'll club 2-3 more questions, which would be more apt for you. The first one, another one that adds here is, would you consider online moots in the CV? Do you think that is going to be considered?
I think it adds a flavor or adds, a depth, adds depth to the CV. It's a great talking, a conversation starter, talking point as well. It shows enthusiasm. It shows in what capacity you've been a part of a moot series in. So a lot of attributes or personality, personality traits that are attributed to the different roles that you play in a moot, right? So a lot of that comes out during the interview. So I think it's important that one does moots, because a lot of our partners would have done moots who are interviewing. So sometimes they resonate with the moots that you may have done with. Sometimes it can get you brownie points. I'll be as honest and candid about that.
Yes, I think the same thing also applies to online PG diploma courses and all. And this was anyway on even before the COVID-19 crisis. A lot of, even during my times, a lot of my friends did opt for these online diploma courses. Even if they are not very good, I think Radhika is in a better position to answer again.
I think,
who give a brownie point?
Yeah, it's always advantageous for students to arm themselves with additional qualifications, right? While lack of diplomas or online courses may not be necessarily a deal breaker, but I think it always adds a certain, or it sort of displays a certain drive, discipline, curiosity, and a willingness to learn, which all of us, at least as employers, on top of the subject matter expertise, that shows that you're interested in the subject, that you're prepared for the new world. So I think, when I see something like this, I would be tempted to ask the students saying, what made you sign up for these courses, or what can you do now that you couldn't do before? So I think they make for, interesting, courses to take. And I would definitely say, if you have the time to do them, then you should certainly.
So another thing is, Radhika, do you recommend any, platform specifically for securing online internship? Do you think anything like that is there?
Online internships, I mean, there are just internships for us. We've just adapted to a new world where we're doing virtual or e-internships at the moment, at least for the last 2-3 months. So you'd follow the similar process as you'd apply for an internship for an e-internship. I don't think in terms of process or the operations, anything has changed. It's what you bring to the table as a law student. It has become a little more competitive because, earlier you would be fighting with, say 200 students. Now it'll probably be more because a lot of people have a lot more time in hand and so on and so forth. So I think it's just become competitive, and you need to sort of arm yourselves with better and bolder knowledge of the world, I guess. Yeah. Sure.
Okay, Abhijeet, another question is, how do you think you can secure, and both for Radhika and Abhijeet, secure internship in tier 1 law firms, especially for first generation lawyers?
Sorry, Radhika, you were saying something.
I said I'll let you go first.
Well, I'm a first generation lawyer, and I can tell you, being from CLC, it's a good college, etc. My application for internship at no law firm was accepted. And even though I was a very active mover, maybe Radhika was not there that time, maybe I should have sent her the application. But but I'll tell you, it comes, it's not really a handicap, but it just makes the process much more interesting and challenging. So what I did, and what I think anybody from CLC should do, is not just to be obsessed with working at a tier 1. Do that, try that. And if you don't get a tier 1 in, say, your first year, you'll probably get it in second year. That doesn't mean that you will not do an internship in the first year. You should do an internship, go for a tier 2, that's not an issue. Or work in-house, I mean, as an intern, I mean, there are some positions. So what is important is, are you taking steps in the right direction? If you are, I think you will get someday to a tier 1. And I think that is the goal that you should definitely aspire for.
I absolutely echo that sentiment, Abhijeet. I don't think there's anything wrong in joining a tier 2. In fact, a lot of the tier 2s also get commendable, amount of work and quality of work that sometimes you may, fall through the cracks in a tier 1 if it's a larger team. And this is a that often comes to me saying, in a larger team, I'm not getting the right kind of work or the right kind of diversity of work, which you may possibly, get hands-on experience in a tier 2 for sure. So I will echo your sentiment on that.
Okay. Okay. A lot of students have repetitive questions, so I'm just clubbing them because, we'll wrap up in some time. So one important thing a student asks is that how do you think that age plays a role in the corporate law firms? Do you think age has a role at all to play? Because, I'll tell you a brief background, probably Abhijeet already knows, but for Radhika, students in the CLC, they have a lot of practical experiences, and then they think that they'll come back and do a law course for 3 years. So a lot of them are in the age group, which, probably is in a bracket which is post 27 to 35, or sometimes even more than that. So probably from the question comes, do you think that age plays a role while getting a job in the corporate legal firms?
So I think I would bank on the experience that they've had previously. Of course, age has a role to play. I won't deny that. I don't think I want to paint a rosy picture. But I think I will continuously go back to the experience that they've had before. That'll arm them and come to our law firm or to any law firm with a value that nobody else will. So I think the experience really does matter. Again, it really depends on what age they're coming at. So, I mean, that's something that I can't honestly comment on at this point.
Point.
Yeah.
Sorry, Ruchita, please go ahead. No, you were saying something.
No, I was just asking, so what age, do you think after which the law firms are really skeptical to look at the CVs? Is there anything like that?
I don't think you can just, honestly just say chalk and cheese about this, because there are many variables that come into play when you're deciding on a candidate. I don't think it's just the age. So I don't think I want to harp again and again on the age factor. But I really want to see what the candidate brings to the table. What's the value add? Do I already have somebody like that on, within my workforce? Is that candidate bringing something new to the table that I already don't have? Multiple variables, along those lines.
Okay.
One additional point, and won't like to elaborate more because I think Radhika has already covered it. My point is that if you are an applicant and who has appeared in other competitive exams, and that's why probably you're on the other side of the age group, my only concern will be that if you're sitting in an interview, try to convince the person who's taking an interview that you are past your attempts or your process to get through to competitive exams. You want to pursue yourself in the legal career. That's important. I don't think any law firm or any employer would like the fact that you are trying to get a job in that organization, and at the same time, in parallel, you would also continue to prepare for civil services or any other competitive exams. Because at least, especially in the short term, the law firm or any organization spends a lot of time, money, efforts in building and grooming a lawyer. There's a lot of effort that goes into it. And it's only after a few years that you start getting the returns in terms of a good, strong lawyer. So important thing is to convince that you're past it, and this is the only thing that you want to pursue. And the earlier that you decide and you realize that that is not working for whatever reasons, the better it is. I mean, if you decide to apply to Khaitan Company at say 35, I think not many people will respond to your application. And it's not a reflection on the age. It's just that, today you have so many law schools producing good law students. So it makes it difficult for any top-tier law firm to justify having that person unless until you have an exceptional track record. It's a lot different in the US, where it's very common that people pursue LLB, JD programs after working for many years. It's very, very normal. I mean, in my class at NYU, we had students who had done PhD. They had worked with different companies and now they were pursuing it.
Yes, I think that is true. And I think, as Radhika very rightly pointed out, it's not just the age, but yes, along with age does play a factor. We cannot deny.
What else do you bring on the table? Is it
correct?
That is what you have like 5 years of whatever government service experience, and now you want to private service.
Or even in the corporates, in somewhere in the allied lines of law subject, maybe that could also bring a good thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I'll take the last question now, because there are a lot of other questions, but I'll just take one question and we end for the day. And that is, again, since HR screening is a very, very important process. So as such, sitting through this corporate job, how do you think one needs to prepare, at least the students need to prepare themselves for the HR interview along with the technical rounds? That's something, a tricky thing for all the law students.
I think now that, we've been doing this long-term internship program with CLC for the last 2 years, especially our corporate practice, this is something that I can, speak with absolute conviction. I think what students need to arm themselves with is research. I think they need to research the firm that they want to work in, the area that they want to work in. So if somebody says, I want to specialize in M&A, and a basic question is, what is the difference between M&A? They should know things like that. They can't appear for an interview for a specific practice without even knowing what the practice stands for. So I think very basic research about the firm, about the role that you're applying for. Ask questions when the employer or the firm has put out, a job application, whether it's for an internship or whether it's for a full-time role. I think you just need to do a lot of research and be prepared and of course substantiate well on what the work that you've done and you've put in your CV. So be just ready for that. And then keep yourself abreast of the matters that the firm is doing or the practice in which you're interested in working. The firm that you want to work with, you should follow at least say the last 10 cases or matters that they may have worked on. That speaks of your curiosity, that speaks of your enthusiasm, that speaks of your interest. And I think that will go a long way. And I think that's lacking across the different students that I interviewed over the last 2 years, not just from CLC, but very many other colleges as well.
Okay, Radhika, one last question from my side. You know, I've been handling placements since the past 2 years now, 2 sessions. So one thing I've seen, you know, during this post, the crisis, COVID-19 crisis, is a lot of legal firms, you know, they have recruited, like they have hired, shortlisted a lot of candidates for long-term as well as short-term internships, you know, before, let's say, sometime during the February or March period. And then they were put on hold, like these recruitments or these internships were put on hold. And I think, not to say even Khaitan has, we do have certain long-term internships on hold from Khaitan as well. So not a specific question for Khaitan, but overall, how do you think that this could work on? Because, you know, a lot of students are in apprehension, especially with big names like Khaitan and all that, you know, I have landed with an internship, but I'm put on hold and I don't know whether I'll get through this COVID-19 period. What will happen? You know, there's a real uncertainty going on among students. So if you could just give a brief on that.
I don't think we should shy away from the realities of what's happening outside in the world. Businesses are struggling. That's not to say, of course, law firms are also, finding it difficult to get constant stream of work. Work has been slow, but it has been steady. And I'm hoping it picks up. And, consequently, we will open up, the entire, platform where we were looking at internships. I don't think we have, I think it is on hold. But I think the right way to say it is it's just been deferred. As you may already know, you may have read on Legal India and Bar and Bench that our fresher intake has been postponed. Typically they used to join us in July, but we're looking at for them to join us in October. So things will look up, hiring will ramp up, and our lawyers are in the business of it being always open. So I think that's the silver lining. So with all of this happening very, very quickly, I think we will look at reopening this in the short, medium term. I can't comment on the timelines, but I'm looking at, a slight deferral, but let's fingers crossed, and I'm hoping that we're able to open this all over again.
Very true. Okay, thank you so much. I think I'm not taking any other questions. A lot of the other questions for students who have posted a lot of questions, they were repetitive. Some of the questions I've clubbed. So I think all the students has, got the answers that I wanted to from the panel. Special thanks to the panel for spending your valuable time with us, and from the placement assistance. So we all are extremely happy, and I cannot tell how happy we are to receive your valuable comments for all our students. I would also like to specially thank my put a thank you note for my small team that I have for the PAC in the CLC. I know all the students in the backdrop are really, really working hard, to get through the entire crisis period. We are continuously looking for internships and job prospects for students even during this time. So thank you, my team, PAC, and thank you, panelists, and of course, the student participants. I hope you have got a really good insight from this webinar, and I hope we go ahead with this kind of webinars again. Abhijeet and Radhika, and of course, even Madhavi in our absence, I would like to thank all of you, and let's look forward for other such series in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Pleasure, Abhijeet. It was a pleasure meeting you. Thank you, Ruchita. And special thanks to Kakul and Vibhuti, who've been, absolutely on top of things. Yes. Congratulations to the entire PAC team, because I think this is the first of a kind webinar that, at least we've been invited to and spoken at. So yes. Congratulations. Well done. Thank you so much. Have a lovely weekend ahead.
Okay. Thank you so much. Yes.